Welcome everyone to the 17th Annual Festival of Birds. I'm Sarah Falkowski, your Festival Director and Education Coordinator at Rookery Bay Research Reserve in Naples, Florida. And I'm joined by a whole cast of people today that I can't wait to introduce you to. So I'm going to give you a little more information about the festival and what to expect today, and then I'll turn it over to our field camera. Okay, first off, some housekeeping. You'll notice that this presentation is being recorded. However, we are not able to share the recording because this is for training purposes. If you're interested in seeing more EDscursions, I'll show you a schedule where we offer them every other week for you to join in the future. Since this is a webinar format, that means that we can't see you or hear you, but we want to know that you're there and we want to help you if you need anything. So we're going to use the chat box at the bottom. It's on the black toolbar at the bottom of your screen and it says chat. If you click in there, you can type a message that will go to anyone on the panel. That includes a panel of people on the back end that are biologists and technical people and customer service representatives. You can put things there if you have questions about registration or technical difficulties. We hope that you'll have questions for our team today, and we want you to put those in the Q&A box, which is just to the left of that chat icon. In the question answer box, you'll be able to type your question and you'll be able to see questions that other people have typed. If we are running short on time at the end, we hope that everyone will have clicked on their favorite questions and the little thumbs up symbol next to it. That's called upvoting. That means that that question will go to the top of the list and we'll answer it before the others. So keep an eye on that Q&A box and see what's being put in there, and maybe it's a question that you have too. And lastly, I want to just turn it over to what else the festival is. I mentioned that it's the Festival of Birds. We're celebrating the entire month, and we have a few other things I just want to mention. We are offering an eBird challenge. So if you're already an eBirder, super easy for you, just submit your list. If you're not an eBirder, go to our website, rookerybay.org, and you can learn from all these cool videos we have in those blue tabs there on your screen about our challenges. So our challenges are offered from January 1 through 31, and we have some really cool prizes. So we'll be announcing the winners in February. So hopefully you'll join us. And this is exclusive to Festival Pass participants only. Next up, I want to extend our offer with our eco tour company. Rising Tide Explorers offers exclusive eco tours within the reserve under the Friends of Rookery Bay. And they were just voted #1 best by USA Today. So since the festival has always had really incredible field trips and they've been so popular, and this year is, well, different than ever before, We want to extend the opportunity for you to make your own field trip by following all CDC guidelines and booking a boat or kayak tour or a kayak rental with our Eco Tour partner. And your festival pass will give you 15% off for the entire month. So we hope you'll take advantage of that. And one last pitch for our final event of the festival, we are offering a trivia night that will take place next week, January 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to have all kinds of nature questions, including a lot of bird questions. And those of you that have participated in our festival activities so far will have a wing up, if you'll bear with me on my silly jokes here, to have an advantage over everyone else, because we do have a lot of bird questions, of which we have covered during this festival. So now I want to tell you a little bit about where we are. We are part of a national network. So Rookery Bay is located right here on this red dot in the Gulf of Mexico. We're in Southwest Florida. And today we are partnering with our sister reserve way up here in Alaska. So it's going to be Rookery Bay Reserve and Ketchimek Bay Reserve as we talk about the birds that travel from the tundra to the tropics. Within Rookery Bay, this is a map of the land that we manage. It's 110,000 acres. This yellow star represents where the Environmental Learning Center is located. Unfortunately, it is still closed for now, but when it opens, we will be sure to tell you as we return to the offices. So this yellow boundary is all of our 110,000 acres that we monitor. You'll see it goes around Marco Island here, south, east, and then borders the Everglades National Park in this stair-step boundary. So all of this land is managed by Rookery Bay Research Reserve. And today we're going to be joined by our partners in the field right here on the tip of Marco Island, where Tiger Tail Beach is located. And the education team here at Rookery Bay, I already introduced myself, and you're about to meet the 3 other members in addition to some special guests. So I just wanted to show you who you'll be meeting, and I want to turn it over to our partner all the way in Alaska, Dana.
Hi, so my name is Dana Nelson. I'm the education specialist at the Ketchimek Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. Sometimes we call it KBNR. So you'll see that acronym a few times. In these photos, I was out on a seabird island just outside of the reserve boundary. Photo on the left, looking at tufted puffin burrows. Then you put your hand in the burrow, try to look for a puffin. Well, I reached in and got a fork-tail storm petrel instead for the picture on the right. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Our boundary, this is our boundary map. We have 370,000 acres. We don't manage any of the land. We have different partners that manage the land. You can go to the next slide, please. Just want to show you the scale of it. In the scale of Alaska, it's 1/5 the size of the lower 48. Our state partner is Alaska Center for Conservation Science within the University of Alaska Anchorage. We're the only fjord type in the National Estuarine Research Reserve system. Oh, excuse me. And then we are, I told you how many acres there are, 370,000 acres. We have a 28-foot tidal range. So it's crazy times. Sometimes you'll have a mudflat, and then 2 hours later, the mudflat is covered in water. We're part of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network, and our habitats along the shoreline, great for shorebirds, include salt marshes, rocky intertidal, and mudflats. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So within this photo, you remember that boundary map? So this is an aerial view of Ketchimek Bay Research Reserve, or Ketchimek Bay, and it's going into a high tide. We have 15 glaciers that deposit into the bay, that lovely light blue color. That's our glacial deposits. So it's running off into the bay. That high water, or high tide, is pushing it up to towards the head of the bay. And in that armpit, you see where the
Uh-oh, it appears as though Dana is frozen. That's what happens when you're in Alaska. Dana, are you there?
Can you still hear me?
Okay, yes, you're back. Great. You unthawed very quickly.
Oh, good. I talk with my hands too much. Maybe that's what happened. So our top photo is looking at salt marshes. The bottom is that rocky intertidal. The bottom photo is those lovely mud flats, and we'll talk more about those. Next slide, please. We can introduce you to our next guest.
Hello. So I'm Colette Luza. I'm the avian specialist with Rookery Bay. Most of you guys are familiar with Rookery Bay now because you're involved and you're here. But these pictures are kind of what you're getting when you come to Rookery Bay. You're getting a lot of sand, a lot of shells. We've got our Marco Island dome homes in the background. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the birds that are actually utilizing both the habitats down here and the habitats up in Ketchimek Bay. You could go to the next slide, please. The first one of these birds is the red knot. And some of you guys may have heard of this bird. This is a bird that we have down here during the winter. And every time I go out, I take volunteers with me. And they always say, red knot, it's not red. And down here, it's not. We get this drab bird that you can see. This picture by Jean Hall is the red knot in the winter. And this is when we see them down here. But they're actually breeding all the way up in the tundras in Alaska and up in northern Canada. And during the breeding season, they're this beautiful bird with a nice red belly and a speckled back. If you could go to the next slide, please. And they have one of the longest migration routes of any bird. So as you can see here, they have their summer breeding ground all the way up north. You can see it in Alaska and above Canada. And then they fly around 9,300 miles a year to get from that breeding area all the way down to the tip of South America to Terra del Fuego, which normally I don't struggle to say. But these birds do this every year, twice a year. It takes several months for them to be doing this. And along the way, they're stopping at a bunch of different stopover spots. So some of them will stay here all year, but many of them are, or well, not all year, all winter, but many of them are down in Terra del Fuego now. But in about a month, they'll be heading up north and they'll be trying to find different food resources. So this is where I'd like to kind of spotlight our team in the field. So if we could get Janine and Morgan up, see if they can pop on.
They may be having some
There we go.
with their camera. So if they're not there, we'll narrate on their behalf.
I see Morgan. So this is Morgan. She's out on Tiger Tail Beach. Sarah pointed out where that is right now. And this is one of the places where red knots are hanging out right now. And what they're doing is they're walking around and they're looking for small crustaceans like coquinas. And that's what they're eating right now. They would also be eating other things like invertebrates that they could find. Morgan, can't see her yet? I'm getting some feedback that we're not able to see Morgan's camera. Oh, now we've got Janine up looking at that beautiful water. Were you guys able to find any coquinas out there?
They're not able to communicate. They're having some connection difficulties. Thanks for bearing with us, audience, wherever you are, probably in the comfort of your own living room, maybe under a soft blanket if you're in the northern climates. Our team is out at Tiger Tail Beach, and this is the nature of technology, right? So we're out there with a portable MiFi unit and an iPad and an iPhone, and it looks like they were back there for a second. We can see waves.
All right. Well, the field team is trying to find some little, oh, there we go. So Sarah, can you spotlight Janine?
Yep, she is.
All right, so this time of year when they're down here, I can't see her very well because of being a host, but I believe that she's got a handful of these small crustaceans called coquinas. And that is one of the big things that our horseshoe crabs are eating here. But they eat different things in different locations. So when we see them, they're looking through the mud, looking for tiny little invertebrates and crustaceans. Then they'll fly up north and they'll actually land in a place called Delaware Bay. And that's also got a nerve, which is what's so cool about these National Estuarine Research Reserves is there's a whole network of us and each one is located in a different place, but these birds are tying us all together. So when they're in Delaware, could you go to the next slide, please? Oh, there we go. When they're up in Delaware, they are heavily using horseshoe crab eggs for their migration. And if the horseshoe crabs are laying eggs at the wrong time, or if they're not there in the numbers that they're supposed to be in, these red knots are not able to continue their migration up there as successfully as they could have. And these horseshoe crabs are another really, really cool kind of success story. So it used to be that horseshoe crabs were used for fertilizer and for bait for fishing. So people would catch them, they'd grind them all up and they'd throw them in traps and use that to catch other fish. And there was no regulation on how many of these were used for fertilizer, no regulations on how many of these were used for fishing. And then the biomedical industry figured out that horseshoe crab blood actually has a coagulant in it and it can detect bacteria. So now every time there is something that's injected into a person for a medical field, it has to be cleaned off using horseshoe crab blood beforehand. So right now, our vaccines and everything that we're getting for this pandemic from the doctors, right down to the tubes that they're using for when you get a swab done, that's all being checked by horseshoe crab blood. And you'd think that this was actually a problem and that we'd be losing all of our horseshoe crabs due to the biomedical field, but it's the opposite. So these horseshoe crabs are being drained of some of their blood, but then they're being let back go and they can swim away. And there is some that die of this, but the numbers are regulated. So they can't have too many and they're really, really gentle with these creatures. And that's actually allowed the horseshoe crab population to stabilize and is kind of helping to stabilize this population of the rufous red knots. Now, or the rufa red knots. Now, these red knots are not the same subspecies that are in Alaska. Those guys are probably going down towards Hawaii instead of down towards us. But when they get up to the tundra, these birds are both kind of nesting in the same habitat in the tundra in Alaska as they are in the tundra in northern Canada. And when they do get up there, they are eating an entirely different thing again. So the horseshoe crabs don't make it up to Alaska. So when the birds get up there, they're actually eating spiders and insects and snails. And sometimes if the insect populations are scarce, these guys will even eat some vegetation material up north. So it's kind of cool to see these birds as they fly from very far south up north and eat different things at different NERs along the way. So that's kind of a little bit about our horseshoe crabs. And if you see this guy here has a tag on him, that is from Florida's Horseshoe Crab Watch. And Delaware Bay has had a huge citizen science program that Florida is trying to kind of get going as well. So if you're ever out on the beach and you happen to see a bunch of horseshoe crabs, look for a little tag like this. It'll tell you what to do if you find one. But that'll tell us a lot about what the horseshoe crab population is like here in Florida and may help us to figure out what our red knots are eating as they're coming through the state. So Sarah put a link to Florida's Horseshoe Crab Watch in the chat box. So if you're interested in getting involved, go ahead and check that out. Now, if you want to go ahead a slide. The black-bellied plover is another one. I really wanted to kind of highlight this one because it's another one where when I take people out onto the beach and I say, oh, there's a black-bellied plover, everybody goes, there's no black belly on your plover. And there isn't. They look like this. They're this gray-brown black-bellied plover during the winter when they're down here. But when they go up north, they've got this rich, beautiful black plumage. And I like this picture a lot because it kind of shows you what the habitat looks like in each place. And you can see how when they're down here and they're interacting with a lot of peregrine falcons, if they look like the black-bellied plover in this summer picture, they would be easy targets. But if they look the way they do in the black-bellied plover in winter photo, you won't see them as well and they won't be nearly as much targets for the predators that are on the beaches. And we've got a range map on the next slide. You can see that they spend their winters on the coast of the United States, but they nest all the way up in Alaska and in the Arctic tundra. All right, now I'm going to turn it back over to Dana.
Thanks, Cole. So our next bird is the ruddy turnstone. And so our ruddy turnstone in the wintertime down in Florida, Gene Hall took this beautiful photo of the ruddy turnstone, but when you look at it, you're like, no, that kind of looks like the other birds. It's a little drab. Sorry for using that word. But then this is what I see up here in Alaska. The ruddy turnstone has that beautiful black collar, gorgeous back with the different colors and the bright white belly. I mean, it's almost like two different birds when you look at them. And so when we're looking at these, when you're breeding, have you ever heard of the word peacocking and you want to look your best? Same thing. Other birds do that too. They want to look their best, attract those mates, and stand out to get the best going in the springtime. So if we go to the next slide, when they're called, you can see their range map. They go all the way down to South America. They're usually found on the coastline. And so that blue on our map is for winter. So it's a non-breeding area. They're migrating through is that yellow, and it goes all the way top of Alaska. So the Ketchikan Bay Research Reserve, a lot of the time, it's their stopping. I just forgot the word. They're a flyover where they stop and they are resting there. It's just a stopover, and they'll rest for a few days and then go all the way north. And I want you to see this, the beak that Gene Hall got a beautiful photo. Why they're called a turnstone is they turn stones. And so they'll turn over pebbles and rocks, shells to get their prey. We go to the next slide. This is our bird of the year for the Ketchikan Bay Shorebird Festival. So Oceana Wills made a beautiful photo. We have our virtual, It'll be a hybrid event, our first one ever for the Ketchick Bay Shorebird Festival, May 6th through the 9th. And if you can, well, you can kind of see that upturn of the bill that Oshie did a gorgeous job with that. And then as they're flying too, you can kind of see it's just slightly upturned. And then the bird on the bottom right, it's turning over a little rock, just like they do in their habitat. So there's no more field cams. That's okay. We will see guys later. We are gonna go to our next bird. This one I think is pretty amazing as well. This is called the Western Sandpiper. The Western Sandpiper on the left-hand side is again from Jean Hall. And this is what they look like in the summertime, non-breeding plumage. When we're saying plumage, it's their feathers, what their feathers look like. And then on the right-hand side is from Aaron Lang. He's a great birder here in Homer. And you can see they have that red on top, their crown, and then the back, you start to see those gorgeous red colors again. And they're dipping their beaks into the water. They have a crazy tongue that we're gonna learn about in a little bit. If you go to the next slide, please, we can see their range. Their range, they go from, again, from South America all the way up to Alaska, and then they breed on the western side of Alaska. A lot of these birds, if the Yukon Flats, or Yukon Delta is that western side of Alaska, and that's where tons of birds go to nest and breed in that area. Again, Ketchikan Bay is that stopping ground, so it's a gorgeous place for them to eat. And you can see, so Aaron got this picture of the bird with its beak in the water, and it has a really bristly tongue. And what they're eating is, it's a crazy thing. It's called biofilm. Have you ever heard of biofilm? It is consistent of microscopic phytoplankton or diatoms, and it settles in there. And I think it's better if we just watch a video. What do you guys all think? I think so. So we're going to go to our next slide, and we're going to watch a video by Hawkeye Magazine. Put this together in 2016. So I'm going to stop talking, and you guys are going to watch this video.
At Roberts Bank in the Fraser River Delta, millions of migrating western sandpipers land on the mudflats to fuel up on a nutritious, energy-rich superfood called biofilm. Biofilm forms when bacteria and single-celled plants called diatoms stick to the slick, smooth mud. These diatoms use sunlight to make their own food, such as carbohydrates and omega-3 fatty acids. They secrete a mucus slime that binds them together and onto the mud, hanging on even when the tides wash over them. Western sandpipers have special bristly tongues that allow them to slurp up biofilm. Fresh water from the Fraser River mixes with seawater over Roberts Bank. The birds flock to the high intertidal zone, where there is moderate salinity, because this is where the most nutritionally beneficial biofilm forms. This rich biofilm repository allows sandpipers to store enough energy to travel the next 1,000-kilometer leg of their journey.
So it's pretty amazing. They have that bristly tongue eating the biofilm, and it gives them enough energy to go. So what happened was a researcher at the Ketchikan Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve and our president of the Friends group, it's called our community council, they were like, I really like birds, and I saw this, and I want to do something. I want to do something. And one of the researchers was actually not even at the research reserve. She is one of our partners at the University of Alaska Anchorage. Her name is Audrey Taylor, and Katie Birch is in these photos. She was one of our researchers at KB-NER. They got together and they started a biofilm research project. And this is about maybe less than a quarter mile from our office is this giant bay, surprisingly called Mud Bay. So when you have those really low tides, it can be 2 miles of mud. But during our Shorebird Festival, it is covered. It'll be thousands and thousands of western sandpipers and least sandpipers out there foraging for food. So what they did, they collected samples. And this was in this past spring. So Katie went out there And oh, that president of the community council, that's George Metz. We used some of his photos. Thanks, George. And so what she did, she collected about 2 centimeters of biofilm. So just that you can see that bottom photo scraping just a little bit. And then she got some mud samples too. So you could see some of those marine invertebrates. So our snails, mollusks, clams, all those fun things, marine worms, and going to look at the samples. So we'll go to the next slide. And that next slide, these are some of our findings. So we found some diatoms. There's more diatoms than this. I just pulled 2 of them. So we had Cercerella, and if I'm saying that wrong, I'm sorry. I tried to practice. And Nichia is what we found in some of those samples. And those were samples that were also found in the Fraser River samples. So we're like, great, they're similar species that the shorebirds want to eat. And then this was pretty crazy. When we looked at the marine invertebrates, the nematode worms, Katie put a dye on them so you could see them because they're kind of translucent and it's hard to see without this dye. So it's just a little pink dye and makes them a really fun color. And so it's really small, about 1 millimeter, or maybe 2 millimeters if you stretched it all the way out. But 60% of the samples found, or the animals found in the mud sample, a nematode. We didn't know that. So it's a fun thing you can play in the mud and learn all kinds of things. And then the second most abundant animal was this crustacean, the Comecia was the other one. So we're just trying to figure out, what do these birds like to eat? And they're all these critters that live in mud. And living in the mud means you're epipelic. So these species can be epipelic or live in the mud. Keep that in your mind. It might be used in something. So we can go to the next slide. If you want to come to the Shorebird Festival, you can do it virtually. And so it's Ketchikan Bay Shorebird Festival, May 6th through the 9th. You don't know who's going to show up virtually. They could be all of a sudden someone just pops up on the screen saying hi. Maybe they're sitting in a chair and just, who knows? So if you have any questions or wondering anything about the Research Reserve in Alaska or the Shorebird Festival, let me know. I can put my email in the chat box in just a little bit.
Great, thank you.
I should say Sarah or Cole. Yes.
All right, I just want to wrap it up with a final photo from Rookery Bay Research Reserve. And I also want to mention that this is an EDscursion. That's a fancy word we made up and made a cute logo to describe our virtual live field trips. So if you're interested in coming along with us on another featured program like this, I'm going to put the link in the chat box and you can sign up. We have an EDscursion every other week. And so far they're on Fridays. So we'll hope to see you in about 2 weeks. Okay, I think we are going to move to the question portion of our presentation. So we hope that you guys have some questions. I don't see any in the Q&A box right now. So we're just going to talk amongst ourselves until you guys enter them. So the Q&A box at the bottom is where you can ask questions of Dana, of our field team, of our ed team at Rookery Bay, or just in general. So we're so curious what you want to know out there. I'll start with one. I would love to know the background of our featured speakers. So Dana, if you want to start about how you got to this job, then I also want to hear from Cole. I think it's really interesting that you guys are so young and so passionate. Like, give us your secrets.
I thought you meant the background of the screen at first. I was like, well, it's the ceiling. So I graduated from Central Michigan University, so I'm from Michigan. And for my degree, I had to go on an internship. So I interned with the Student Conservation Association. I was in Kentucky for about 3 months, and then I realized I didn't want to go home. So I applied for other SCAs, is what you call them, and I thought it was a joke to apply for one in Homer, Alaska. I was like, I'll never get one in Homer, Alaska. That's so far. That's funny. Well, I did. And so I interned for a year with Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge, and they are very focused on seabirds and marine mammals. Never heard what a seabird was until I went up there. And I was lucky enough to go on one of their, actually, two different islands. And that's where I met the research reserve. And they hired me after my internship. So it was great. That's about
Well, they're
it.
very lucky to have you. Thanks for partnering with us today. Cole,
Yeah.
what about you? How did you end up at Rookery Bay in the shorebird line of work?
Yeah, I've always been obsessed with birds since forever. But I went to West Virginia University. I had no idea that I would become obsessed with salty birds, the seabirds and the shorebirds. And slowly I started making my way out and wound up pretty much being entirely coastal for the last several years. I did a similar job to what Dana was talking about, where I was on Project Puffin up in Maine doing seabird work. And I already was pretty obsessed with them when I did that, but that was sort of the end. Now I am a seabird shorebird biologist, and I will be coastal for the rest of my life.
Well, we're so happy to extract you from Ohio, Cole. In case you're not aware in the audience, Cole is one of our newest hires at Rookery Bay. So great, so great. I did have a question that came through the chat box that I wanted to ask, and I'm going to ask Dita to answer it, and then she's actually going to moderate the question. So I'm going to turn it over to her. But this is a really hard one, Dita. You're going to have to think super hard. What is the tidal range at Rookery Bay? Dana mentioned that she has 28 feet difference between high tide and low tide. What is it at Rookery Bay?
It's only, I think, about 3-4 feet. So we always are amazed by, whoa, look, we have this big mud flat, this oyster bar is exposed, and then it disappears. But they're dealing with a much larger tidal range. So again, a little bit of a difference. But thank you so much, everyone, for your wonderful questions. One big one, a lot of questions about biofilm, because I honestly had never heard of it either before you mentioned it. Does biofilm occur in other regions or just in Ketchikan Bay?
It does occur in other regions. You have it in your region. And so it's that, I know, isn't that wild? And so what it is that phytoplankton settling on the mud, and you have a lot of sun. I went and visited. It was very nice in January for that sunshine. And when you see like a little green layer on top of your mud, that's biofilm. Do you have anything to add, Cole?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're down here and you're looking at any mudflat, especially in an area with lowish salinity, so the areas that you can see close to shore, you're going to see that biofilm, that green color. And we don't know exactly if those same diatoms are in our biofilm here, but there are different diatoms that create a lot of different biofilms. And you can find biofilm, I mean, essentially anywhere. You can even find biofilm like in your shower. So it's all over the place. It's just which diatoms are in those areas. But right now, the Western sandpipers are down here in large numbers, and they are probably eating that same biofilm type stuff here.
I don't think I'm going to look at my shower ever again the same way, but
Sorry.
Thank you for making that comparison. So these kind of go together. So biofilm is always microscopic. Yes.
You can never say always. So I want to say for the most part, you should use a microscope because it is really tiny, but you never know. Maybe it's just a biofilm could be a piece of seaweed and you just pick it up and you're like, oh, well, there it is. That's my understanding.
And then since biofilm is so small, how do they figure out that that's what sandpipers are eating and not something else?
That's a great question. People were watching the birds. And so they're looking at them and they notice like, they're settling in the mud flat, but it's green. Isn't that gross for them? I wonder what's going on. And so there's different articles, that video. I think that video was from the article from the Hawkeye magazine. And they're like, oh, maybe we should investigate this. So it's just having that curious mind and observing animals. You're like, you can start to just dig in and find out what's going on.
And I think this one can go to both of you. Cole, we'll start with you. What kind of birds are here now? And the same for you up in Alaska. What kind of birds are there? Are there any birds this time of year? And are there any other birds, other the ones that we mentioned, that kind of go back and forth between these areas, but maybe in the summertime and kind of switch roles? So Cole, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I'm afraid we've stolen a lot of the Alaska birds. So in the winter, we have a lot of different species of shorebirds down here. And a lot of them are continuing down into South America, but we have some stragglers that hang out on the beaches here. So we have a large variety of shorebirds here right now. And those western sandpipers are one of the biggest birds that we have down here, not in size, but in number. We have a ton of them down here right now.
The one that we have that it migrates, there's two different birds that migrate from northern Alaska and then they hang out in Ketchimak Bay right now in the wintertime, is one shorebird, and that's our rock sandpiper. And I can put that information in the link or in the chat. And I always think it's so cool that there's some birds that actually hang around, like shorebirds, that hang around in Alaska. It's cold, if you want to know. It is very chilly. From the last time I checked, we had about 3 feet of snow. So it's great for skiing, not so much for a shorebird. And then we have a lot of eagles that hang around year round. But that other bird that migrates from the northern part of Alaska down to Ketchimak Bay is called a long-tailed duck. And that's one of my favorites because they sound like people are laughing. And so you'll hear it. If you ever want to have a good giggle, listen to a long-tailed duck sound. They're like, that's my impression of one.
And then we have another one. What is the best time in winter at Rookery Bay to see these birds? So maybe what time of day would be the best time to see them, Cole?
Yeah, to see these birds, probably a low tide. The best places to see them in the area are going to be your mud flats. So anytime the mud flats are exposed, you'll be more likely to see the shorebirds. Winter is the best time to see a wide variety of shorebirds. And then there are plenty that migrate through. So if you go out in September, you'll see a few species that we don't really see right now, like the semi-palmated sandpiper that just doesn't hang out here during the winter.
All right, we have another question about migratory birds. Woohoo, everyone got the memo that we're making this connection between different places. We saw Arctic terns in Alaska. Do we ever see those in Rookery Bay?
Sorry, what?
Arctic terns, do they ever make their way to Rookery Bay Reserve?
They're probably offshore, but they don't come ashore here. So you will occasionally see reports in the Gulf of Mexico somewhere that somebody is on a pelagic and saw an Arctic, but they fly really, really long distances without stopping. So we just don't see them.
All right, here's another one for you. Dana, does the tidal change in Ketchimak Bay qualify as a tidal bore? I am not familiar with that term. We saw Bay of Fundy in Canada and thought it was amazing. So you'll have to explain what a tidal bore is.
Yeah, so a bore tide is, you can see that in just north of Ketchimak Bay in Turnagain Arm. They have, I believe, is about a 35-foot tidal range. And when we say 28 foot, 35 foot, that is are extreme days when you go from about 22 feet all the way down to -4 feet in 6 hours, 6 hours and 20 minutes or so. And so that boar tide is when you can see the high tide coming in. It's those extreme days, and all of a sudden you're like, people will surf on them in Turnagain Arm. And so you have, yeah, it's just a huge wave of water coming through. But no, we don't have that in Ketchikan Bay. You just have to drive about 4 hours north and you can see one.
And our last one, Cole, I think is going back down to Florida. So talking about all the lovely, confusing things you can see at Florida's beaches. You know, you have the really big clumps of algae, macroalgae. There's like just green, slimy stuff on the beach. So what's the difference between a green slime and a biofilm?
Yeah, well, so biofilm it's about the diatoms. And so there are microalgae that are a biofilm. So it's kind of similar. But yeah.
I'm saying not, it's like a subsection of algae would be biofilm, but all algae could be slimy and fun, not so fun to step on when you're at the beach.
Right, and there could, depending on the algae, there could be biofilm on an algae as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for all your wonderful questions. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get. That's what makes these EDscursions so fun. Each one is different. So I'm excited that we're offering them every other Friday because we'll just keep learning, and so will you. So thank you all for joining us today. I did want to mention that we have one more event as part of the Festival of Birds. I'm putting the link in the chat box, and that of course is our trivia night. So you guys will have an edge. So we hope that you'll join us. And lastly, when you close your Zoom window, you will see a survey. That information is so important to us because we live in a virtual world now. So we have a lot of programs just like this, and we want to make them as good as we can. So we would love your feedback, good, bad, whatever. We will also want to know where you're located, because when we had the festival in person, we only had people that either traveled there or lived in our Collier County, Southwest area. But we are reaching audiences not only throughout Florida and throughout the country, but with the help of Dana, we're outside of the continental US for this program, as well as around the world. So we would love to know who's watching and where you're located. So please fill out that survey when it pops up, and we'll see you at a future event soon. Thank you for joining us.